We are live.
Hi, everybody.
Isn't that exciting? We want to thank you, everyone, and welcome to this live webinar presented by the Community Broadband Action Network, or CBAN. I'm Curtis Dean, and joining me at the bottom of the screen you see here is John Willow, co-founder of CBAN. And we also have a great guest today, Chris Hall. He's the Federal Program Officer for the NTIA in Iowa. And we're going to be talking about what else? Digital equity. In fact, we're going to be talking about how to get ready for the digital equity grants that are coming out. So we'll tease that in just a minute. I want to thank everybody that's come on already. We got John and Jackie. Hey, Jackie, how are things up in Michigan? Appreciate you being on. And if you have any questions at all in the chat function, just type your question in, and I can actually show those on screen, or I can keep you anonymous if you'd like me to. But we'll make sure any questions that you have, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of them, we'll be able to share with our little panel here. So with that, John, I'm going to hand it to you, and let's get things rolling.
All right. So I'm going to just kind of lay out a little bit, frame up our thinking as practitioners, and then I'll toss it to Chris, and Chris can get into a little bit more, well, a lot more of the fine points. And then when he has gone through his initial slides and explanation, then we want to open up the conversation and really take a lot of questions. And if you have questions along the way, just go ahead and ask them in the chat, and we'll get to them all as quick as we can. So the reason we're here today, as you know, is that it's almost time for those states to start dispersing their first tranche of digital equity funding. And that's going to be aligned to each state's digital equity plan. And it's not entirely clear how it will work to the layman, including us, until we had a long talk with Chris the other day. So that's why we're here. I don't know how important it is at this point to so we have there are 3 digital equity grants. The NTIA controls them all, and the first 2 grants are, of course, controlled by the state. There's the planning grant program, which is over and done with, and the capacity grant program, which is what we're about to start later this year. There will also, or later next year, there will also be a competitive grant program. So the in the capacity grants, there are 5 approved uses for those, and I think probably most people in this webinar will be familiar with those right now. The 2 that we really care about are how we can support implementing the state's digital equity plan, and how we as agencies who aren't with states might plan for and plan to receive and work with subgrants. It's really easy. It gets a lot easier to sort out how this all falls together when aloha, Tony. When you think about it just as 60-20-20, that's just a real easy, clear. Hey, Jessica, really clear and easy way to sort that out. So on May 28th of this year, the state's own applications for grant disbursement are due. That means the states have applied for their first tranche of the funding that they've been generally approved for. So each state will receive up to 60% of their total state allocation. And then from there, they will start working on what they want to do first. Now, each of these tranches is a standalone grant, so that just because the state is awarded XYZ, but in the initial, doesn't mean that they will get all of it in everything they asked for in each grant. So probably they will get most or all of it, but just like that, those numbers are everything that the states get, they still have to apply for, to have their grant dispersed to them. So shake your head if I get off base, Chris, but otherwise I appreciate your nods of support, for real. So, and then in 2025, the second important date for us in 2024 is August 28th. And what that date is exactly, that's when the NTIA tells the states what their grant awards are. Then the states will have, if I understand this correctly, the states will have 9 months to announce their partners and start working on grants. Chris, is that where that comes in?
Yes, NTIA will be making awards to the states for their capacity grants no later than August 28th of this year. So we have already started to get some applications in. They will be reviewed and awarded on a rolling basis per federal statute and the language that authorized this program from Congress. Those awards cannot be made any later than August 28th. And as soon as they are awarded, a state has from that point forward up to 9 months, if they have not already identified who they will be working with, potentially working with as a sub-grantee or helping to have outside organizations implement their activities. They have up to 9 months to identify those organizations, to describe the activities and the strategies that they're going to be using. So they have to submit their application no later than May 28th, but it can describe broadly some of the goals that they plan to move forward with. And if they need some additional time to work through the sub-granting process to identify partners and such, they have up to 9 months after they receive an award from NTIA to declare those.
Great. Okay. So I hope that was all crystal clear. No, I think that was great. Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, that was yeah. Great job diluting a winding road there, or not diluting. You know what I mean. 20% will be released in 2025. That's the second tranche of general funding. It's not really specified, but when we were speaking with Chris the other day, he suggested that, like, realistically, that might be where more sub grantees and contractors and organizations like that will jump into the action. And then in 2026, there's a third tranche of funding that will be released, and some states have earmarked the third tranche for state level competitive grants. And I just want to emphasize that, because we just talked about competitive grants, but they're actually, in your state, there might be two different competitive grants. The one that your state may put out in 2026, and the federal competitive grant that comes out in 2026 itself. So yeah, so I'm sorry, going on. Yeah, so just a quick touch on the competitive grants. We are not ready to start working on those now, so don't worry. But it will be $1.25 billion, and it's discretionary. So that's going to be a good place for those programs that don't necessarily align in lockstep with what the state is doing, but aligns with your organization's mission and the mission of digital equity. So if you are one of the 6 specified subdivisions, then that's then keep your eyes open for that discretionary grant program as well. Oh, let's get rid of that one. Chris has a better one.
He does. That's right.
That's right. So in summary, what can we do now to prepare? The NTIA has just put out a most excellent manual and a guide, and it's on our website and their website, of course. But at the end of this presentation, we'll put up a QR code. See, it's amazing. Actually, that's not the same one, but it's
sorry.
That's okay.
Good one.
Anyway, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a QR code and a bit.ly link. And you can you can start at our website if you want, and there'll be the resources from the NTIA that we talked about today. There will be NDIA and other resources too, and you can start there if you want. But many of you might already have that, because they had a webinar on the 26th of April that was very good, and that's where they sort of unveiled it. So what can we do as organizations now is get ready. It's not as specific as like starting to write your grant, but the work is really important. So you need to check your organization's readiness for the work to come. And that means just really taking a look at your internal assets, your own organization's mission, your goals, strengths, weaknesses, all of that. And when you set your prospective goals, don't just set them in alignment, of course, with your mission, with your organization's mission, though please stay aligned to that. use your state's digital equity plan as a close guide. You can identify potential partners to round out your organization's strengths now and build those relationships. Because we don't know exactly what each state is going to do, put out in terms of their NOFOs, you can't get too specific right now, but you will generally know that if your state, for example, is doing digital navigators and you have a certain piece of the capacity to field digital navigators, but another organization might, like United Way might be a great complement partner to that.
Mhm.
So you can identify those partners and start having conversations with them, find out what they're interested in. And more is more when it comes to sharing ideas. And then you can start crafting a narrative right now around your commitment to and your goals for digital equity. And that can be adapted to your grant applications later. It's a great exercise to do internally in your organization right now, though, because it will really help you clarify to yourselves and get it said out loud in the room what your digital equity priorities are. And then most important, please try to avoid the gold rush of trying to lock in everything now. Much is still unknown and there's a long way to go. So with that, I will turn us over to Chris Hall.
All right. Well, thank you to John and Curtis both. Thank you for the invitation to join you and for CBAN for hosting this afternoon. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and taking some time out of your busy day. My name is Chris Hall. I'm the Federal Program Officer for the BEAD and Digital Equity programs in Iowa. And I want to give a quick plug for NTIA and start with some information that I'll also mention at the end of my slides. That is, we really encourage you to reach out and find information about your state broadband office and each of your program officers. NTIA has been very thoughtful about designing this program and having a broadly distributed number of people who are out here to provide good customer service on these grants and make sure that we are available for questions. So there's somebody like myself in each of the 50 states and territories. There's somebody in each of your states listening right now. And to find the contact information for your broadband and your program officer, I would encourage you to visit internetforall.gov, www.internetforall.gov. Find your state and find the contact information for those individuals and for your broadband office. I understand there's a lot of technical information on these digital equity programs, and so I want to give a high-level overview, and we'll try to dig into some of the details. I have a fair number of slides, but I'm going to try and breeze through them so that we can also allow time for questions. And I'll mention that because these slides are available. They're part of a webinar that was hosted by NTIA very recently. And so these slides will be shared with CBAN, and we'll make sure that you have access to that. But they're also available and posted on the internetforall.gov website in case you'd like to review them on your own, or we breeze through them quickly enough that you want to go review it again. A quick disclaimer as well. These slides are intended solely to assist with better understanding of the capacity grant program. Any moments that I may misspeak, or if I describe something a little bit differently than it's stated within the guiding documents, does not supersede, modify, or otherwise alter what is listed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity posted to our website. So my hope is to give accurate and good guidance and feedback today, but if there's something that is in slight contrast or not quite as it's said directly in the NOFO, please default to the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the Digital Equity Program. At a very high level, these programs are built to create digital inclusion. And according to the White House Executive Order on Advancing Equity, equity is defined as consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals. And the term underserved communities refers to populations sharing a particular characteristic that may have systematically been denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civil life. Along the way to creating digital inclusion, there are a number of different factors that you need to consider. Is the broadband service affordable? Do individuals out there who are trying to access the internet have the appropriate type of digital literacy and skills training to know how to do things like apply for a job or pay a bill online? Do they have the right devices in order to do so? Do they have access to quality technical support? And do they also have things that help protect their privacy and cybersecurity so that they can use them with confidence? The Digital Equity Act programs are part of the Internet for All initiative conducted by the White House, and they include 4 different programs. The BEAD program, which focuses primarily on building out last mile infrastructure to make sure that every American has access to the internet at their home or business. The digital equity programs, which foster inclusion and skills. Tribal programs, which are designed toward Native entities. And the Middle Mile program, which is geared toward providing middle mile infrastructure to reduce the cost of connecting underserved and unserved areas. This presentation is, of course, on the digital equity programs, and there are 3 different phases included under the umbrella of digital equity. Recently, states completed their planning process, which they applied for in 2022, and each state and territory in the country was granted a certain sum of dollars to begin the planning process to gauge the barriers and populations that exist in their state, to better understand with sound data and a baseline for who lives in their state, who has access to the internet, who may have barriers that need to be addressed, and how to go about doing so. States recently submitted these plans to NTIA, and recently each of the 50 states had their plans accepted. What that means is that each state now has a blueprint for how to move forward. They understand who lives in their state, where these covered populations exist, and how to hopefully address the barriers that may be preventing them from inclusion in having digital equity. The state capacity grant was just very recently announced on the heels of accepting those plans. The capacity grant includes $1.44 billion. It is open exclusively to the states, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and those that completed the planning process. So now that they've completed a plan and it has been accepted by NTIA, the $1.44 billion in the capacity grant is to implement the plans that they have designed. Coming soon will be the competitive grant, and as John mentioned, this is open to certain entities such as political subdivisions, tribal entities, nonprofits, community anchor institutions, education and workforce agencies, and these are standalone and independent grants that have to be detailed in the future. These will be announced with greater detail in the near future, and we encourage you to keep watch. Make sure that you're signed up for updates through the Broadband USA and internetforall.gov websites. As information from those programs comes forward, we will make sure that you have an opportunity to better understand them. Where we're at currently, though, is this capacity grant program where states are going to implement their plans, and they may be doing so on their own, or they may be working with organizations and partners to help implement the program, which you may have interest in. The capacity grant program is geared at reaching these covered populations that have been identified in each state's plan. So who is included in these covered populations? Covered households can include a income-limited household or a low-income household, not more than 150% of the poverty level, individuals who are aging of years 60 and older, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with a disability, those with a language barrier, including English learners and those with low literacy, individuals who are members of a racial or ethnic minority group, and those who primarily reside in a rural area. How do you work towards serving a covered population? Well, we know that technology is just part of the puzzle. Ultimately, this is about reaching people. And we need to make sure that the impacts of digital equity really foster inclusion in areas that will make a difference in the daily life of people and communities. That's through economic and workforce growth, ensuring that people are able to apply for jobs and find gainful employment where they live, educational expansion and access to improved learning, more individual control of health through telehealth or the ability to really manage one's healthcare remotely or in sometimes healthcare deserts, and improved access to civic and social engagement and making sure that people are able to participate in community events and access services equitably no matter where they live without needing to leave or move that area. Making these funds available, we are going to, as we said, each state has now created a digital equity plan. States are going to now implement their digital equity plans, and NTIA is in the process of making these funds available as they apply no later than May 28th, and they're granted on a rolling basis with those awards to be made no later than August 28th of this year. So how are these allocations determined? They are determined by federal statute and language that was authorized by Congress, and they're based on a formula. So states have a certain amount of dollars that have been allocated to them. They still have to apply. They have to plan and describe what activities they will use the funds toward. And NTIA will work with them to make sure that this matches with all of the requirements in federal and state law. But the formula includes three factors. First, total population relative to the total population of the country. Next, covered populations and the number of individuals who fall into one of those covered populations. And last, broadband availability and adoption. Earlier, John described that there is a lot of states and applicants understand this to be kind of a 60-20-20 basis in which the different funding tranches for the capacity grant program will exist. The first tranche is being allocated this year, the second next year in 2025, and the third in 2026. I would encourage you, just one small caveat, to consider that it's not a true 60-20-20 allocation. As each of those future tranches are released, this data will still be utilized and it will use the most recent data available. So if these are based on census factors or factors of broadband availability and adoption through the NTIA Youth Survey or FCC, that data will guide future funding as well. This year's allocation has been determined, but the allocations for the second and third tranche in 2025 and 2026 still has to be determined. And we encourage states to understand that they shouldn't spend time trying to consider through or factor what the exact dollar amount they'll receive is. It's still flexible, and we will work with states in the future as those dollars become clear and available. Here is a quick overview of the funds that were allocated to states. I'll pause here just in case you'd like to try and eyeball where your state may have received a certain allocation. And this is for the first tranche of digital equity capacity grants. And what can these funds be used toward? The use of digital equity funds can go toward 5 primary areas. They can go toward implementing the plan that they have recently developed, updating or maintaining that plan, evaluating the effectiveness of implementation, so making sure that as dollars go out into the field and their plans are being implemented, they also need to be evaluated and make sure that they are being used effectively and making the right impact. They can be utilized to make subgrants to partner organizations, and they also have some ability to use them for administrative costs and managing the grants within each state. The subgrantee selection process. So states can implement these activities on their own. Some states may choose to do so, but they also may choose to work with partner organizations through a subgranting process. If a state chooses to engage subgranting, they must apply for the capacity grant funds they must apply the capacity grant funds in a fair, transparent, equitable, and inclusive process for selecting those subgrantees. As it was mentioned earlier, they must do so on a timeline. They can describe which subgrantee organizations they've selected, and they can do so when they submit their application prior to May 28th, or once they have been awarded their grant, they can also have up to 9 months to describe and narrow down specifically which organizations they plan to work with. And this may be one of the areas most of interest to our audience.
Hey, Chris, I'm going to just jump in there for a second. We've got our viewers are saying that they're hearing a loud pinging, and we're trying to figure out where that's from. Are you getting email notifications or something on your end?
Yes, I just silenced it, and
Okay.
apologies for that. Yes, there is a parallel meeting that is going on, and some chat function that's
Gotcha. All right.
unexpected.
Well, we will. We got her solved now. So we'll go back to you.
We got it. Permitted activities. Where should states, given that they are going to receive these dollars, where should they allocate them? How should they use these funds and really prioritize and focus on the use of these dollars to make them most impactful? They should be focused on covered populations, stakeholder engagement, making sure that their implementation strategies are measurable so that the data that they found and established as baseline data in their plan can then be benchmarked, and they can really ascertain whether the activities are making an impact and to what degree. And also, they should be prioritizing the types of activities that will make long-lasting and meaningful change. So there is a recognition here that the first tranche of funding likely won't be enough dollars to fully implement a state's plan. But if it gives them the opportunity to prioritize and evaluate which activities can make the greatest impact, a long-lasting and meaningful change, and do so in a cost-efficient manner, we encourage states to be thinking through that process as they're working with subgrantees, as they're really designing the next phase of this program. Here are some examples of allowable uses. They can go toward digital literacy and skills training. They can go toward device programs, economic development, entrepreneurship, and job training programs, online accessibility programs that ensure websites and applications are designed with accessibility in mind, and they can also support affordable broadband service. And again, I would emphasize this slide is just talking about as states choose priorities, given that they have a finite number of dollars and these really well thought out, well designed plans that they've recently completed, here are some of the criteria that they should consider when choosing priorities: the total number of people served, the number of programs implemented, and some of the quantifiable evidence toward making an impact that they can then demonstrate to NTIA. Here are key dates to remember. These are the same dates that John mentioned at the outset of this webinar. It is a 5-year period of performance. So the grants that are made for the capacity program this year in 2024, once the award is made, the clock starts running and they will have 5 years to implement and close out those grants. So 2024 to 2029 would be the first round. Next year, if funds are available for the capacity grant in the second tranche of funding, those would also operate on a 5-year timeline. And the third tranche of funding would similarly operate on a 5-year period of performance. So it's likely that states will be implementing capacity grants that overlap. If there are 3 tranches of funding, 3 individual capacity grants, those 5-year periods of performance will overlap in all likelihood. States don't need to fulfill them over a full 5-year timeline. They can implement them as early as possible and on a shorter timeline if need be, but it's likely that most states will see some of that overlap. Their applications are due no later than May 28th. They'll be approved and reviewed on a rolling basis, and NTIA expects to award those applications no later than August 28th. I will also say, I know that there is interest within this audience on the competitive grant program, which is the one that follows on the heels of these states. And it is available to political subdivisions and nonprofits, and there are many more details that are forthcoming. The one detail that I'll include and mention here for your interest is once the awards for these capacity grants begin to be made, the competitive grant NOFO will be announced no later than 30 days after the first capacity award is made, and that's required in federal statute. So there are many details that are still forthcoming, but that is one for your interest. The NOFO for the competitive grant program is not far off on the horizon. And once awards begin to be made to the states, those kind of independent, standalone competitive grant processes will also become clearer, and a new program, the competitive program, will be announced shortly thereafter. For all of you who are out there wondering, how can you get involved? How can you make an impact? Right now is an ideal time for you to engage with your state broadband office, to read through the digital equity plan that they recently submitted and had accepted by NTIA. This is a great opportunity for you to understand the populations that exist in your state. The state has gone to great lengths to measure and find out who lives in the state, who is experiencing a barrier to digital inclusion. And so this is a great time for you to read through their plan, to understand the effort that they put into it, and some of the different projects and programs that can complement what states are going to be implementing soon. You can also reach out to your state broadband office and ask if they have a good sense yet with their capacity grant, if they plan to implement those projects and activities on their own, or if there are certain activities that they will be looking to sub-grant out and sub-award to independent organizations. If they are, it's good information for you to be aware of, and they may have a sense already of which activities they're going to be using for this first round of capacity grant funds. Lastly, keep an eye out for the competitive program. As I mentioned, that's not far off on the horizon, and federal statute requires NTIA to release details on the competitive program soon after awards are being made for the capacity grants. And so what's next? I mentioned that we really encourage you to reach out to your state broadband office to know who your federal program officer is, because there is somebody like me who exists in each of the different states and territories. We love making connections out in our communities. I grew up here in Iowa. I live here in Iowa. I work throughout the state on these programs. And so if you're in a state and you are looking for a contact and somebody who understands the programs at a local level and really understands what the state's been working on to plan for this process, reach out to them, make an introduction, better understand what comes next and how you can be part of it. And if you're a state, we expect you to complete your application soon. Those applications, as I mentioned, will be reviewed and approved in the coming months. Here are the internetforall.gov website, where these slides can be found, where contact information for your state broadband office and federal program officer can be found. And there are also some really good frequently asked questions that have been posted to the website. So NTIA has been conducting webinars on these programs in recent weeks. Lots of good questions came from those webinars, and many of them have already been answered and detailed on the Internet for All website. So please do a little bit of reading, check the NOFO, look at your state's plan, and also read those frequently asked questions. If you do have questions after doing so, by all means, reach out to the Digital Equity Program through Digital Equity inbox, digitalequity@ntia.gov. And so those are my slides. I know it was a quick overview, but I also hope that maybe it has generated a little bit better understanding of what comes next and potentially some questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's actually when we talked recently, you gave me a piece of clarification that is obvious, but I hadn't thought about it. So we had been, even CBAN had been really focused on like, how do we apply for grants when all of this is done? But you make an excellent point that some states, like all the awarding to sub grantees or sub awardees, getting other organizations involved outside the state won't just be by a grant process. They, depending on the state's own plan and rules, they may be going direct or forming partnerships. So not everything is grant dependent unless the state puts out its own competitive grant and then the NTIA's competitive grant. So there will be granting and there will be grant applications, but it is not the only way that the states are distributing their funds.
Correct. If you're listening today and you yourself do not work for a state agency or state broadband office, the places and moments where you may be eligible to implement these programs or access funding and apply for grants, they could happen in a couple of different forms. You could be assisting your state with implementing their plan. You could be a subgrantee of the state and working on, Curtis, I pulled up my slide of kind of the different activities again. So it's possible that your state plans to implement one of these activities. Perhaps they have a device program they plan to implement, or a digital skills and literacy training, or some sort of curriculum that they are looking for partners to help implement. They may not want to do that themselves as a state. And so if your state is sharing with organizations out there who work in this space, if they've identified which of their priorities will be done first, it's possible that you could help the state implement them and apply to the state as a subgrantee to help with that process. Or it's possible that in the future, as more details come around about the competitive grants, you might be able to apply directly to NTIA and be a competitive grant awardee to implement digital inclusion activities of your own. We would encourage you, if you're thinking about the competitive grants, now, even with few details about what will be included, it's still very, very valuable planning time right now.
Mhm.
Look at the work that your state has already put into their plan, because they've gathered tons of data. They've assessed who these covered populations are, how many there are in each state, what activities could likely help improve access for those populations. And so they've done a lot of the legwork and the research to really understand what's happening out there in the field. And by reviewing that plan, you'll gain a better understanding of ways that you can make a difference. And it also is valuable time for you to think through partnerships. The more organizations that are partnered together to make a difference and implement or apply together, the better. We really think that partnership is important to these grants. There are many organizations who work in this space who are very capable, but maybe they have an expertise and they want to partner with somebody else who has a complementing expertise. And so having those conversations right now and understanding really the legwork and planning that each state has conducted is still very, very good use of your time.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
We bring up a couple of questions here that we've had. One from Jackie up in Michigan. Is there a deadline to apply to be a subgrantee, or is it rolling? Probably differs by state.
Jackie, you're correct that it will differ by state, which is all the more reason to understand your state's thought process. The deadline will be, the state will have to determine who they're working with as subgrantees no later than 9 months after they receive an award. So they have a deadline, but it's likely that each state will differ. Some will be implementing these activities on their own, or a few of the activities they may choose to implement on their own as the state. Others, they'll be subgranting, and they, of course, I'm sure, want to know who out there could be a helpful partner in the effort. But it will vary by each state, so long as they have something submitted to us, a plan, and subgrantees identified no later than 9 months after they receive their award.
And this is probably really obvious, but just in case it wasn't clear, to apply to become a subgrantee isn't like applying for a status. It is applying directly to a program that you want to support or be supported by. And that might come through a subaward, it might come through an RFP, it might come through a grant application.
Yes, and if you look at the digital equity, the NOFO, there's more information. I would really encourage, if you're thinking about being a subgrantee, look at pages maybe 29 through 32. There is some good information there about how the subgranting process can be conducted, what requirements are needed by the state to identify subgrantees, and what the process has to entail in order to, substantiate that it has been fair, accountable, open, transparent, and inclusive. So states will have to demonstrate to NTIA that they've held a fair subgrantee selection process, and that's described within the NOFO. I believe roughly somewhere on page 29 through 32, there are some better details.
So you've read it a couple times?
We've been buffing up just along with everybody else.
Sure.
Hopefully not required to memorize it. You're bringing another comment from Jackie about, she's in a very interesting position, like many people that are out there, practitioners in this field of digital equity. You're in small rural areas in many cases, not everybody, but a lot of people are, and trying to come up with all the, getting the attention of anybody to award you money. It might be a challenge, but, I think that's why the key is to start now. And we called the title of this preparing to prepare, because that's really what we're doing. Is you are putting together a plan that chances are what you're working on now may not exactly be what you end up pursuing when the actual grant window's open. It may be that you have to pivot, but it's better than starting from scratch and starting from zero and suddenly having to scramble to get a plan together. Use this valuable planning time now to come up with concepts that you could support, concepts that your agency, your organization could be excellent at, and then be ready to adapt your concepts to what the reality is when the actual state program is announced.
Exactly.
And Jackie, I would say also, where you're a small rural nonprofit, obviously many organizations, they have limited time, limited resources to submit an application. We really do encourage you to partner with others and share, share those burdens of limitation where you can, but also, being in a small expert in a rural area lends expertise to you for one of the covered populations. In places like Iowa, the largest covered population is those who live in a rural area. And so that can be an element of expertise that also supports your application.
Absolutely. That idea of collaboration is key to this whole thing, I believe. And we've touched on it here. There's probably no single entity on this call today, yours truly included, that can do everything and do everything excellently. But we all can network with others who can add that special sauce to a project that we could all work together on and make great things happen. So I think that's the key is collaborate, be networking now with those other organizations in your state or in your region that play a role in digital equity and digital inclusion, and start making those connections now. It's not about turfdom. That's one thing I always, it's easy to say, oh, I don't want to collaborate with that entity because they do the same thing we do and we're competing for the same donors or whatever. It shouldn't be about that. This is a mission. We have a mission to perform here, and we should all work together as best we can to make sure we perform that mission.
That's absolutely right. It's not about grant hoovering, as they call it. So when you approach people who you might be interested in partnering with, remember, you're just fundraising right now. You're doing informational interviews to start if they're organizations you're not terribly familiar with. But don't be afraid to call someone you've never talked to before because you think they're in a familiar or similar space to you. There's plenty of work to go around and plenty of relationships to be built. And this digital equity ecosystem is going to evolve over the next 5 years. And where we all are now might not resemble very much where we are in 5 years. So make all the friends you can. We'll make one big tent for all of us.
I got a comment here from John. I think John's in Louisiana. Thanks for coming on, John. Consider amplifying the role of the digital navigator. We're calling our digital independence navigator, since one of our underserved areas are rural and elderly disabled consumers who need assistive technology to bridge the gap to fully access the web. Excellent point, John. The term digital navigator has been kicked around a lot. I think we could probably give partial credit, at least that, to the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, We're guilty of that too, because we were one of the 18 cohorts that has an NTIA digital navigator. But defining what that means to you and your organization and how that fits into what the state is looking for. For example, your state plan may never say the word digital navigator, but there's probably something in there that is flavored like a digital navigator. Here in Iowa, that's the plan I'm most familiar with. They say right in there, digital navigators. We want a digital navigator course. So, that's the way we can, concentrate on trying to fulfill that mission.
And in the state of Michigan, the digital equity plan names digital navigators, but then describes that role as a regional resource navigator who doesn't deliver direct services. So I guess the takeaway is, unless you're crystal clear, like really read what your digital equity plan seems to imply by a flavor of a digital navigator that's not named one, or what is a digital navigator by your state's definition.
Another comment here from Jackie. We're in an umbrella county under a prosperity region in northern Michigan, and the state has already indicated they will focus on those prosperity regions. We know from experience that we will get the trickle down programming and attention, but we feel we can handle our own navigator, and it won't be an automatic. I'm fairly confident, Jackie. I'm 100% confident you can handle your own navigator. We've been working with Jackie and her team there for a while here, and they've got their stuff together, let me tell you. So
Yep.
Thanks for commenting on that. So one of the things that we talked about early on, and I want to emphasize it again, is really trying to focus on what piece of this mission you're best to carry out, your organization, and you as individual leaders within an organization, because there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of great people out there, great organizations that are all trying to do the work. And so trying to really zero in on it's an introspective process, I believe, right? You have to really look inside to see, what can I do? What can I offer to the outside? So just encourage everybody to do that.
So thank you all very much. We really appreciate you taking an hour out of your busy workday. And if you have any follow-up questions for us, hello@broadbandaction.com is a great place to find our team. And Chris has given ample contact information for the NTIA. Again, we have a QR code. If you do you have that, Curtis? It's on the last slide.
Okay. Yes.
Yep. The last one. Yep.
There we go.
So anyway, if anybody's interested in that, it's not the most comprehensive in the world, but it will get you started and get you to places, because again, this is all in the spirit of all the work needs to get done, and there's no reason to be turfy. The NDIA, for example, has created excellent resources around digital equity. The NTIA has created excellent resources around understanding the process. The Benton Institute has created excellent resources around understanding what creates quality of life in terms of our broadband efforts now, and other things. So I encourage everyone to look far and wide to see who's done what. And if a resource doesn't work for you, go ahead and set it aside and go find another one, because people are doing the lift on that.
Just not to throw out a plug for CBAN, but one of the things that we did last year is we began convening in central Iowa, at least, a task force, a working group of the entities in this region that are performing digital inclusion work of some sort. And so we did that last year, knowing that eventually this funding would be available, because we wanted to get an early start on identifying who are these collaborators out there, who are those partners. Maybe we lead, maybe they lead. We don't really care who leads as long as the work gets done. So I would encourage people to kind of be looking at that in your own region too. Couple other comments here. John has talked about Michigan State University as a STEM Up program that might help in the workforce development component of your work. Mm-hmm. So I think he's dropping that little hint to Jackie there. Thanks, John, helping out.
Yeah, sharing thank you so community. Much.
And here's another one. NIADOC says we are a nonprofit organization. NIADOC palpeace.org. We need to create a partnership with the South Sudanese community in Colorado. That is an excellent point, because those covered populations are going to include populations such as certain groups that maybe aren't getting that kind of support now. And I know one of the things that's going to be very important in many of the states' digital equity plans is having the ability to meet people where they are, not only where they live, but also how they speak and what their culture is. So
And in terms of Colorado specifically, I want to encourage you to reach out to a gentleman called Nate Stone. His name's Nate Stone. He's with the Denver Public Library System, and he is one of the NTIA digital equity mentors. And he's really made himself available, and he's doing terrific work. And so I don't have his contact information handy, but his name is Nate Stone. He's with the Denver Public Library. I think if you did an internet search for him or went to their website, you can find him easily. I also believe his contact information is on the NTIA website because he has offered, he's offered his services as their volunteer mentor.
And again, reminder, if he has any comments or questions, go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll share them here. We'll stay and go through as many of these as we have. We'll shout out from Creston, Iowa there. Hey, Jeremy, how are you? Thanks for coming on. We're doing some digital navigation services down in the Creston area now. So appreciate you having you on and joining us here for our little discussion. Well, I think we don't see any more questions coming in, so I think that kind of wraps it up for us. Any other closing thoughts, Chris?
No, I think we've covered the topic well. Just want to extend my thanks to everybody for tuning in this afternoon. And again, thanks CBAN for the invitation. I hope that the information is helpful to you all and just encourage you to seek out these resources we've mentioned and keep in touch with one another as well as with CBAN, with NTIA and others.
Yep. And
Jessica, oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Just Jessica is posted another comment there about state extension. That is an excellent point because most state extension services have very deep reach into our communities. And so they would be an excellent partner for almost any type of project you might be looking at doing.
In fact, I think the University of Wisconsin Extension is the host of a digital navigator that is in the NTIA cohort too. Okay. So, there's lots and lots of ways that extensions, like you said, tentacle into the community. So good opportunities for partnering.
Just show one more just to blow our own horn a little bit. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
We do appreciate it. We were really, when we were putting this together, we wanted to say, what are the gaps we can fill up from some of the other webinars that have been out there? Because, you've all been watching them. Every one of them, you spent hour after hour on webinars and reading guides and whatever. And so we wanted to say, is there anything we can fill in with this? And I hopefully we hit some of those gaps for you today.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
we will have this available. We're going to post this on our website in the digital equity resources section. So if you're interested in sharing it again with anyone, it will be available there by the end of the week. We're small. And we have to work hard. So we may not get it up for 2 days, but we'll have it.
We're small but agile.
Small but agile. Yeah.
Also, this webinar, the link that you have to this webinar will remain active. So you can watch this on demand again. If you missed a part of it, you can just click that link and go back in and watch it on demand at your own time of your own choosing. We'll also be posting this on our YouTube channel, the CBAN YouTube channel. So there's another opportunity for you to check it out if you missed any part of it. So thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate you coming on. And again, Chris, thanks for being a great guest. And John, as always, thank you.
Almost every category of CBAN membership is free. So don't let that hold you back if you're interested in joining us. We are associate members who provide paid services to the broadband industry. Support us with their membership dollars so that we don't have to charge anyone else membership dollars.
And there's the secret sauce. Every one of you that signs up for a free CBAN membership, it makes it one step easier to convince one of the vendors out there in the world to support us so we can keep doing this good stuff. So it's free. We love you. Sign up. Smash that subscribe button. Oh, that's a different.
Don't do that.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll let you go. I'm going to go rest my voice. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here on our webinar, and we'll see you next time.